Yesterday was the first day of in-person early voting in North Carolina, and it broke a record. Just like Georgia a few days ago, North Carolina has broken a record. And we'll see if this trend continues in North Carolina today, but a good sign for voters in North Carolina. Now, what does this tell me initially? Well, it seems like we're moving away from that pandemic era voting where we just really focus on mail-in ballots. Now, who does that benefit? Possibly the Democrats, because before the pandemic, the Democrats were more likely to do in-person early voting, whereas Republicans were more likely to do mail-in ballot voting. So if we're sorting back to what we saw pre-pandemic, this could actually be beneficial for Democrats. And the numbers that are coming out in North Carolina look better for Democrats too. So that is a good sign. We'll delve into those early first day numbers today in this video. We'll also talk about Georgia, which does not look good. It's staying very stagnant and really looking like the Republicans have an advantage as of this point in Georgia. So, of course, this weekend, a lot of things could change. After this weekend, we'll see what goes on, but we'll delve into Georgia as well. Now, I'm not going to talk about any of the other states because a number of states are going to have their in-person early voting start on Monday, on the 21st. So we're going to wait until those numbers start coming in and then see how that pans out, and probably have that in Tuesday's video, because in Wisconsin, Florida, Texas, a whole bunch of stuff can change very, very drastically. So let's go ahead and delve into North Carolina right now and see what's been happening there in day one of voting. So if we go ahead and look at just yesterday's early voting composition, we can see that the Democrats are slightly ahead, 36.3% to the Republicans, 34.7%. And then independents have gone down. They are still, though, 29% of those who voted yesterday in person early. So that is a pretty big, significant chunk. Now, if we look at the changes from the day before on the 16th and then yesterday the 17th, we do see a shift between independents and Republicans, but we only see the Democrats going slightly down. So you can see on the 16th, they were 37%, but on the 17th, they were 36.4%. So not much of a shift, but you do see Republicans going up from 27.1 to 33.4, and then the independents going down. So you are seeing that little bit of a shift between those two, but the Democratic numbers are actually staying quite steady. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the voting trend North Carolina partisan nowcast model. We can see the turnout is at 5.58%. That was at 0.88% the day before, so you can see how much early vote in person actually impacts North Carolina. Now, in 2022, 58% of the overall vote that was cast was early vote, so we should expect to see these numbers get higher. And if you look at the nowcast model, if we take that 5.58% of those who have voted now, that's what a nowcast model is. It's not predicting the future. It's taking the numbers now, and then we use that to inform ourselves regarding trends and possible ways in which other routes can go. We see the Democrats are slightly up in the state. And this is a very, very close state right now. But unlike Georgia, which is also a close state that we see the Democrats behind, we do now, after the first day of in-person early voting, see the Democrats ahead. And our geographical accuracy is great. We want that number to be above 0.95, and it definitely is. So when I do my nowcast model, when it comes to the partisan model, I do look at voter registration and just make the assumption that Democrats vote Democrat, Republicans vote Republican, and then make adjustments by county based on how likely that's going to happen based on previous results. Now, let me go ahead and show you a little bit of a regression regarding both the Democratic and Republican registration numbers compared to how those were with the presidential candidates back in 2020. So you can take a look at how close these are. So let me go ahead and show you those. So as you can look at the past, and in 2020, it wasn't a state that we could really look at partisanship and then say, oh, well, we can go ahead and determine that a registered Democrat would vote for the Democrat. So as you look at the left and see the Biden numbers and the Democrats who were registered in each county, you can see our R squared is a 0.6311, which is not that great of a model. It does predict it. It does show some signs of actually being a predictive measure, but it really isn't. Now, if we go over to the Trump number, we see that that number is significantly up to 0.762. So we can see there is a stronger relationship between Trump voters and being a registered Republican than there are Democratic voters and being a registered Democrat. So a lot of you might be asking, Dave, well, how can you say that Democrats vote Democratic when we see this model so far off? Well, there's a reason why. And the first thing is when we look at these regression models, we're looking at percentages of major party votes versus the voter registration percentages. Now, we cannot really do that with total raw votes due to the fact that so many counties are so big and so small. It's really hard to then determine that, especially when you have elections with two candidates, a Democrat and Republican, really running against each other. We can't compare that to the voter registration numbers because the non-party affiliate numbers can make that go completely out of whack. So there are reasons why I don't do that. But let me go ahead and mention two reasons why, even though we see this discrepancy in 2020, we're not really seeing it now. So the first one, and I'll show you the regression model here, is that just these changes happen in significantly smaller counties. All right, so if we go ahead and look at the Democratic registration versus the population, we can see a significant number of those are under our zero axis. So what that means is that those are the places that vote more and more against the Democrats. And as you can see, a lot of them, as far as the actual numbers of voters, are very, very low and a very small proportion of the population. So when we talk about these, we're talking about a small amount of voters. We're talking about some counties that have maybe less voters than a precinct in Mecklenburg County. That's how small we're talking about. That's why this doesn't really skew that much because, again, we're looking at percentages. And this is the last thing I want to show you with this is the Democratic registration drop versus the 2020 vote drop for Joe Biden. So basically what we're saying here is counties that had, let's say, maybe more registered Democrats in 2020, but then yet voted for Donald Trump, a lot of those counties now have more registered Republicans. And what has happened is that the voter registration in many of these counties have adjusted to what the vote results that we see in these counties if we're talking about major party registration. So all these negatives that we see are basically saying as the Biden vote goes down in these counties, the number of registered Democrats as far as a percentage over the last 2 years, well, actually the last 4 years, has gone down significantly. So now we are seeing a lot of counties, as far as voter registration, now mirroring or close to mirroring what we see with the election results. People always ask me, which way are the independents and the non-party affiliates going? Can we tell that from the data? And as we can see in this data, we just can't really determine that. The nonpartisan voters are just kind of everywhere. So it really needs to be done on a county by county basis. So yeah, we are seeing these shifts because the Trump counties that maybe had more registered Democrats, we do see them having now more registered Republicans in many cases. The numbers are going down drastically. And as I mentioned, we are talking about very small counties that really don't impact the overall scheme of things. Remember when we did the first regression model, that was based off of percentages. So that treats Wake County or Durham County just as much and just as equally as a small county. So that's very, very important to know. So overall, the day looked good for the Democrats. The Democrats went up. They ended up, seizing the day and looking good. And I think this is where the Democrats wanted to be in day one. It's still a very close race in North Carolina, but it's good and it's close and it's on the Democratic side. So I would have rather been the Democrats yesterday than the Republicans. Now, when it comes to Georgia, Georgia remains a mess. And it really remains a mess from what I talked about in the last video about just certain counties in Georgia haven't pulled their weight. So let's go ahead and now look at the turnout rates in Georgia from this morning and see what we have, because you can see maybe now why Republicans are looking a little better to win as of this point compared to Democrats. All right, so what we have here are the largest Democratic counties, and what I mean is this is where Kamala Harris is expected to get the largest amount of the chunk of the raw votes. And as we can see, Fulton County is actually performing higher than the statewide average. So the statewide turnout average is 13.4 right now, but you can see Fulton County is at 14.8. Cobb County is at 13.2. So it's really performing where the state is. DeKalb County is now performing where the state is, so it's doing a little better than it had done before. Clayton County is performing a little less than the state, so it's kind of gone down a little bit since that first day. In Gwinnett County still is the problem child for the Democrats, only at 11% turnout. This is what's hurting Democrats big time in the metro Atlanta area. So if we look at those counties, it was really only Gwinnett that had a problem, but it's these middle-sized counties that are causing the Democrats some problems as well. So if we go ahead and look at Richmond, where Augusta is, we see that the turnout rate is only 10.3% compared to the 13.4% statewide. Chatham County as well, we go down to Savannah, you can see it's just slightly lower than the statewide average. Now, if we look at Clark County, we see that it is significantly lower. Now, this is where Athens, Georgia is. This is where the University of Georgia is. And it is almost, not quite, but almost half of the statewide turnout. This is a bad number for Democrats. And then Muskogee County, we have Columbus, and it's actually performing a little bit better. So as you can see, the Democrats are having problems with some counties, some of these mid-sized counties. Gwinnett County is a huge, huge problem for the Democrats right now. So this is a big problem. And the Democrats just don't have as much rural support to help them boost up. There are counties that are more Democratic, that are rural, but the Republicans have a lot more of those counties. And as far as the Republicans are concerned, the turnout in those counties are very high, many times in the high 20s, mid to high 20s right now. So it doesn't look good for the Democrats when we add the rural vote in for the Republicans. But let me show you the largest Republican counties right now and show you how they're doing. So these are the top 5 counties for the Republicans as far as getting raw vote margin, that they're expected to get a lot of the raw vote from these counties. This is where we expect the spikes to be for the Republicans. As you see, Cherokee County is a little bit under the statewide average at 13.0, which the statewide average is 13.4. But you can see Forsyth County is significantly up on the state average. A large county, a Trump county by 66%. Herschel Walker won 70% of that in the last general election. And you can see that we have a significant 4-point increase in that. Hall County, also we see an increase from the statewide number. Coweta County, we also see a large increase compared to what we see statewide. And Bartow County is the only one that's a little bit down. This is northwest of Atlanta. So it's the only one that's maybe a problem child for the Republicans. So this is the reason why Republicans are doing so well in Georgia, even though we expect this to be kind of an even 50-50 state, because the places where the votes are coming in right now are the places where Republicans do well. And that's just a fact of it. One thing that I have been mentioning in my live streams, I mentioned it on videos as well, is I want to see what this weekend does in Georgia, because usually Republicans, white, retired Republicans, will vote during this early cycle, especially in those rural counties. So I'm not surprised that we see this bump. It's a bump that we saw very similar when we look at Virginia, and it looked like Virginia could be close in those very, very early days of early in-person voting. But now, as more and more in-person voting comes in, Virginia is basically starting to get way out of reach for the Republicans, and essentially is, I've put it as a lock in my electoral map. We could see the same thing happen in Georgia. We don't know yet. We really need to have one strong weekend and see how Democrats perform in these Democratic areas. If we all of a sudden see Gwinnett County doing significantly worse and not pulling its weight, and we see these other counties like Richmond County, where Augusta is, also doing the same thing, not pulling its weight, we're all of a sudden in a situation where the Democrats have to panic a little and wonder if this state is part of their target, especially if the Republicans in Cherokee and Forsyth and other counties continue to turn out in large numbers like that we're seeing, even though Cherokee County is a little bit behind, I will admit. So this does become a problem for the Democrats in Georgia. But if you're a Democrat right now looking at North Carolina, things are looking good. Things are looking up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to get into some of the other states because right now in Wisconsin, in Michigan, the models are looking really good for the Democrats, especially in Wisconsin. But that first day of early in-person voting will probably change a lot of that. We'll see. That's going to be on Monday. So I'm going to go ahead and give you numbers for Wisconsin and a nowcast model on Tuesday. Okay. So thank you all very much for joining me. I hope this helped you out in understanding what's happening right now. I just don't feel confident with Georgia, but I feel way more confident with North Carolina, which, by the way, any of you who've been watching my videos, you know that I've been saying I think Georgia can be lost and North Carolina can be won. I talk about this passing the baton from Florida to Georgia, Georgia to North Carolina. It seems like in that early voting data now that these are no longer speculations. Now it looks like that might actually be happening. But we're only in day one of early voting in North Carolina. A lot of things can change over the weekend or over the next week or so. So yes, this is a nowcast, but North Carolina looks better. All right, thank you all very much for joining me. I'll see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are. Bye-bye.